Okay, so this was kind of completely unplanned, but, well, Mauga came out. No, not revealed. Came out. No joke. Now, in fairness, when I say came out, this is kind of like early access. Essentially, we've only got like another day to play with him, and then he's going to be gone until his real release. But you can open up Overwatch right now and play Mauga right now. Which, yeah, that's a pleasant surprise. Mauga was someone we were expecting to see revealed at BlizzCon, but we weren't expecting us to be able to play him until Season 8. But, well, he's right there. Now, people are hyped out of their minds, and I can't blame them. If you don't know who Mauga is, that's fine, really. You're not really missing out on much. You'll pick it up pretty quickly. But essentially, the main reason why people were so hyped for this character in the first place is that they were first, introduced as a character that could be playable, that people wanted in the game literally 4 years ago, so it's been quite a long wait. In fact, originally, this is a fun fact a lot of people have said, but just for those of you who aren't as in the loop, Sigma was supposed to be Mauga, but they kept working on his kit and kept thinking it didn't fit Mauga, and of course then they decided to make it Sigma instead. So what's my verdict on this tank? A lot of people have been really excited to play him, a lot of people think he's really fun, but, I mean, this is kind of the thoughts that everyone has when a character is brand new, regardless of their quality. And just like everyone always says, there are people saying this character is stupid broken right now, which I really have no idea if I'm going to agree or disagree with that yet. I think I'd have to say that my opinion in short would be that while I think this character has been quite fun to play, especially very different kind of playstyle for a tank, very kind of new experience, at the same time, they leave me with a lot of long-term concerns. I think that playing Mauga is always either going to be extremely fun or extremely miserable, with no in-between. And I think that while we're having a lot of fun with him right now, we're going to have to be careful with this character, because he easily could make the tank role even more miserable. Because you know how I keep saying right now we just have walls of impenetrable health, damage resistance, overhealth, healing, and damage? This character is like the epitome of that. This character gets like triple the damage of everyone else every single game, while also being a complete unstoppable block of infinite health when he wants to be and his cooldowns are up. But he's also not that mobile, so you end up in situations where Mauga ends up being unkillable for bursts of time, while also doing more damage than basically any other character in this entire game. But then you also end up in situations where you're slow as hell and the biggest, fattest target in the game, and you're desperately trying to escape the enemies, but you have little to nothing you can do to get away, and without your supports bailing you out, you're basically guaranteed to die no matter how well you play with him. With all that said, let's get into his kit. Now, if I was to call any one part of Mauga's kit my favorite, it would no question be his primary fire, because my god, his weapon is not only really unique and plays very differently to any other weapon we've seen in Overwatch, but also just generally is one of the most satisfying and fun weapons to use in this entire game, which is unexpected to see on a tank who usually gets some of the most useless primary fires in the game. Mauga wields dual heavy machine guns, which means he has a lot of ammo at 300 and can shoot really fast for massive damage, but with a really long reload time. What's cool about this is, as you'd expect, you can choose which of your two miniguns to fire individually by using right-click or left-click. Or, if you want, you can fire both at once. Now, this much I was expecting, but this is where things get kinda surprising. First of all, although it's only a minor difference, these two miniguns actually have different effects, and I really like this gimmick. The DPS and fire rate is both the same, but the difference is that while the left-click fire, if it lands enough shots in a row, will set people on fire to apply a damage over time to them, the right-click fire will count as a headshot even if you body shot if the target you're shooting is already on fire. So essentially a lot of the time you're going for left clicks first and then right clicks on someone once they start getting on fire. And considering, of course, being a tank, your weapon is 100% accurate and tends to spread a lot, of course, being able to have body shots count as headshots is quite a massive damage increase. You'll essentially have double DPS. Now, you might be wondering why not just fire both at once all the time, though? And the reason for that is, if you fire both at once, the spread angle massively widens. Which, as frustrating as that is, I think that's fair considering the ludicrous damage of this weapon. So essentially, once someone's really up close, you basically have the highest DPS in the entire goddamn game, so long as you just hold down both miniguns. But the amount of spread you get from doing that is so ludicrous that you basically never want to do that at medium or long range. Then you actually have to decide, am I using left clicks or right clicks? However, here's where the other positive surprise comes in. I obviously was expecting there would be spread no matter what, and it is true that even if you fire only one at a time, you still get a little bit of spread, which means you can't be 100% accurate. But compared to most tanks, you usually have a lot of spread on all their shots, or something that just hard clamps the amount of damage that it can do past a certain range, like Orissa's damage fall off, or Sigma's orbs simply detonate themselves after a certain distance away from you. In the case of Mauga, he actually has very little spread, even though he still has a little bit when you try and fire at long range, so long as you're only firing one minigun at a time, which actually means he's probably one of the new best options in the game as a tank if you need to deal with people from a distance or flyers. Don't get me wrong, D.Va's probably still going to be the go-to option as a tank to deal with flyers, because I've been trying to say for a while that Wrecking Ball's actually pretty good against Pharah and Echo, and while I still think that's true, I'm not going to pretend that Wrecking Ball's better at it than D.Va. But I think that in this case, Mauga's going to be kind of similar to Wrecking Ball here. In fact, I think Wrecking Ball is probably the closest comparison we have, at least in terms of primary fire. Again, haven't had a whole lot of experience with it, but I think that Mauga's not going to be too bad at shooting Pharahs or Echoes out of the sky. Although, of course, as it is with any tank, it's not really going to be doable if they have a Mercy pocket. Now, of course, it's early days, so the wiki might not end up being 100% accurate, but according to the wiki, these things do 4.5 damage per shot, both versions of the chain gun, of course. They have a fall-off range of 25 meters, and they have a rate of fire of 20 shots a sec, for a total of 90 damage per second per minigun shot. And that's, of course, not including the damage over time on the fire effect. And of course, you can even double that if you're getting headshots. Which brings us to Mauga's abilities. His first ability, which I think in the default control scheme is left shift. I use Q and I move my ultimate to F. Anyway, for default controls, I think it's left shift. That would be your charge, where, well, you charge. It's basically Reinhardt charge, but like actually good, because this charge has the gimmick of having a fortify effect on it, where you cannot be CC'd at all while charging until it ends. Which, yeah, would be nice to get that on Reinhardt, wouldn't it? But that's not happening, is it? Either way, the charge doesn't work quite exactly the same as Reinhardt's, of course. You don't really do that much damage to people if you run into them with it, but you do a lot of damage at the end of the charge when Mauga does a leap and does a stomp at the end of it, which does an AoE damage, which also knocks people really far away and really high into the air. It's quite a large AoE too. But this is mostly used as an engage and disengage tool, and it has a relatively short cooldown. No idea the damage numbers on this thing, but it felt like a lot of the time if people were close to the center of my stomp, it did about 100 damage, probably a little bit less. And this thing is pretty steerable, more steerable than Reinhardt's pin at the very least, except the only issue is that I'm not sure if it is actually the case. It might just be because Mauga's heavy, but when trying to steer it, it feels a little bit like your inputs are a bit delayed. I don't know, it's hard to put my finger on. You can definitely get a feel for it. It's not the end of the world. In fact, I would argue it does feel like it's probably intentional and just something you have to get good at. But it does feel a little bit weird sometimes that like I press right, but I was pressing left a second ago and I still see Mauga going left and it's like, come on, right. As for his other ability, Cardiac Overdrive, oh boy. I have very mixed feelings on this ability, but what it does is you press it, and it gives you and anyone within a 30-meter range of you with line of sight this buff where you take reduced damage and you also heal by dealing damage. The level of lifesteal that you get and the level of damage reduction you get, we don't know yet, so that's just a question mark. But I can tell you, whatever it is, it's very strong. Essentially, as long as you are dealing damage as Mauga while this ability is up, you are effectively invincible to anything that isn't ludicrous damage over time. We're talking stuff like you would probably need a bat-windowed bastion to kill you while this is happening. We're talking stupid levels of damage needed to actually outdo the damage resistance and healing you get off this ability. And part of me likes that, because I've mentioned before, I really like the idea of tanks that are sort of hybrid tank, hybrid supports, in that they don't literally have healing, but they have abilities that can help their teammates that are used almost like a support. I feel like this sort of weird sub-archetype is my favorite kind of character to play a lot of the time, and probably a reason why I took such a shining to Junker Queen. So of course, having a similar AoE buff to provide to your team that is almost support-like in its application, but on a tank, I'm really happy to see. It's just, oh god, this has some very scary implications, but let's talk about the implications at the end. For the time being, basically, this is your stay alive ability. Every tank needs some kind of damage resistance ability, and this is your Orisa Fortify, basically, but on this character. And that might already give you a bit of an inkling why I think it might have some negative consequences, especially since it gives it to everyone around you, not just you. But, you know, I think it's a really cool ability, and I'm glad at the very least that it allows me to sort of fulfill this niche again that I love of being a sort of slightly supporty tank. Lastly, before we get to his ultimate, Mauga also has a passive ability which is quite simple, a little bit similar to Doomfist's. This passive ability makes it so that you can gain up to 150 overhealth by landing headshots, or by landing body shots while someone is on fire with the chain gun, which already does headshot damage, even if, like, you don't headshot, you know, as long as they're on fire when you shoot them. Either one of those count. If you do any of that kind of damage, then you get overhealth for doing it, which helps keep you alive. Which, by the way, I've gone this whole time not even mentioning Mauga's actual health pool. In open queue, it's 500, and when you're in an actual game, like, you know, roll queue, it'll be 650. So he is the third highest health tank in the game. The highest is Diva if you count armor health, and the second highest is Roadhog at 700. So he's just a teensy bit less healthy than Roadhog, but of course he also has this passive which makes his real health a lot of the time closer to 800 because the extra 150 that he has at almost all times while he's in combat. Which brings us to his ultimate cage fight, which is pretty unique and something very different to see in Overwatch, but I think it works for a character that already feels a little bit out of place in Overwatch, but in mostly all the right ways. Cage Fight essentially has Mauga quickly place down a little device on the floor, and the second he places it, it lashes out these chains to grab anyone near to it. And it also basically drops a cylindrical dome down on top of you that is a shield which blocks any healing, so no one inside the dome can be healed by anyone outside the dome or anything like that. At least enemies. I'm not sure if allies are able to heal you through your dome. I think so, but I'm not certain. Either way, when you use this ultimate, you basically force your enemies into a fight. Anyone caught in the dome will not be able to leave and will have to fight you while you're in the dome. When you use this ult, the only buff you get to yourself is that you have infinite ammo until it wears off. So yeah, mostly you just force people into a dome and get to fight them on their own without any help from any of their teammates on the outside. Which makes sense, because with Mauga's stupid health pool and damage, basically the only thing that stops him from being effective is people being too far away from it for him to fight them in the first place, or people running away from him. And so, of course, considering it is quite easy for people to run away from you, you kind of need something like this to be like, oi, get the fuck back here. Thankfully, I can confirm that you can cancel this ultimate instantly at the press of a button with basically no penalty. Only downside is, of course, you won't have the infinite ammo the second you cancel your ultimate, so you will have to go back to reloading after that. But I think it's really good that they let us cancel the ultimate instantly, because it also traps you in the dome. And there have been one or two situations where I have used Dome and then thought to myself, oh god, wait, I don't want to be trapped in here. I get like the one kill I wanted to with the Dome, and then I realize, oh wait, I can't touch point now, and we need to keep on it because it's overtime or whatever. And I'm very glad that I've been able to just instantly press the button and drop the Dome, because even if it was just a delayed cancel, I imagine there would be some situations where that could really screw you over. In my experience as well, it's often quite smart to cancel the ultimate, because there's a lot of situations where you can force them into the dome, and then you will only need to really force them in for a second, and even if you haven't killed your enemies yet, you can kind of cancel it early, because even if they start running away, you probably already have them low enough that you can finish them off. And obviously just getting rid of the dome gives you more freedom of movement. The dome itself has 1,500 shield health, but you are able to break it if you want to. I've never seen anyone do it yet. I've tried to do it a couple times, and even though I have a lot of damage as Mauga, it seems like a lot of people haven't clocked on that they can destroy the dome, so there have been a few frustrating moments where I get caught in a dome, and my whole team is looking at me dying, and I'm trying to shoot to break it open, and no one else is shooting it, and it probably could break if someone helped out, but you know, new character, people don't know the mechanics, a little bit unfortunate. But either way, 1,500 health is quite a lot in fairness. That is more than Tree of Life. So yeah, it's definitely going to take something like a Bastion to be able to break that down, or maybe a Sim charging up a beam on it, which I haven't tested that yet, but I'm guessing that Sim can do that. So that might be a decent counter to the ultimate. Overall though, while I still think this is overall a pretty good ultimate in terms of design and fun factor and all that, in terms of how strong it is, I think this is actually quite a weak ultimate overall. And that's mostly just because while you do want to be able to force people into a fight as Mauga, it doesn't do much. As I say, it gives you the infinite ammo, but you already have 300 ammo. So while I'm not saying it's useless, because your reload is very long and you do need to be shooting a lot, so you probably will use up those 300 bullets eventually, still, it's not a massive benefit. And there definitely have been situations where you start a cage fight and you think, your team will rally behind you because they're all right there, and you use your entire ultimate to trap these enemies, and you think that you're going to get some help, but then the enemy team all shows up to come, collapse on top of you and help out like their tank or whatever when you grab their tank, and your team just kind of runs away. It doesn't happen often, but when it happens, you use up your whole ultimate, and your ultimate basically doesn't do anything except kill you. It's just kind of like, well, that didn't feel very good. It's certainly a lot more useful when people are more scattered. If you just want to go after someone who's trying to get away and just solo them out before their teammates can regroup, it's a lot better at doing that, but it's a little bit difficult to play like that in the first place as Mauga, because of course if you're not with your team, your low mobility means it's really easy for someone to show up who can just bully you for free, and you don't get saved because you decided to walk off without your supports. From my few games with Mauga so far, I get the impression that essentially the point of this ultimate is it allows you to very temporarily be a bit of a dive tank, but the second that your ultimate is gone, you don't really function as a dive tank. It's the kind of thing where I usually start a fight where I'm just sort of poking them from a distance and not going super hard, wait for someone to get sort of half health, run at them, and then cage fight them before they can get away. That seems to have been the best way to use it so far from what I've seen. And as I say, it's also quite effective against other tanks since, it denies them the healing from their supports, and unironically, I think that might be the literal strongest part of the ultimate, just the fact that people inside that dome don't get healing from their supports because the shield blocks line of sight. Oh yeah, I also completely forgot to mention, when I was playing around with this ultimate, I actually found out that the chains don't latch onto you if they don't have line of sight to you. Now, I'm not certain, but I think that means you don't get trapped in the cage, even if you're within range of it, if you make sure that you're standing just out of the line of sight of the center of the cage where the chains come from. Not certain about that yet, but I definitely saw that the chains didn't attach until I peeked them earlier. I just assumed that I couldn't leave, which is why I peeked them. But now that I realize that the chain hadn't attached to me, maybe I could have left? Not sure. If anyone has had that happen to them in the comments, then you can confirm or deny that. Just thought I'd add it in just because it's early days and a lot of people are still figuring things out. Test if that's true if you get the chance. With all that said, that is all of Mauga's abilities, so what do I think of him as a whole? Once again, man, I really don't want to be super negative here because I do think this character has been fun to play. But oh boy, I feel like they definitely need to work out a little bit what they're thinking here, what they think this tank should be used for. I'm not saying that this tank doesn't have a purpose, but it seems like all the purposes I expect he'll be used for are things which don't bode well. You see, as I've said, strengths of this tank, extremely unkillable while his cooldowns are up, though very killable once they aren't up. Extremely through-the-roof damage, which melts just about everyone, and actually genuinely probably out DPS's even Bastion. Decent at long range, even if he does a lot less damage at long range. And while his charge isn't the most devastating move, it is something that allows you to be immune to CC temporarily, which obviously is going to have some nice little benefits, and that does include that you can go right through things like Sigma's Gravitic Flux. Downsides though, I think that Mauga might be the easiest to hit target in the entire game now. I think he might even beat Roadhog. Haven't tested, but it looks like they're about the same size, and if not, Mauga might even be a bigger target than Roadhog. He's just like a big sphere of, yes, hit me right here, I'm going to take loads of damage. And considering you're also playing a tank with very, very little mobility, even if they do have some, it really does feel like, wow, you peak and you melt. So the reason why I'm more concerned about the current state of Mauga is because I think Mauga is going to be amazing at shredding the enemy tank. I think that as Mauga, you're going to be able to bully the enemy tank. Because of the fact you're better at range than most tanks, if the enemy tank tries to fight you from a distance, then, well, they won't be able to do basically anything to you, but you'll still be able to do serviceable damage to them. And if they try to fight you up close, you'll have DPS even higher than Bastion. So essentially, the enemy tank can't do anything to you. like at all. Even if they get a CC, you might even be able to cancel that using your charge and the temporary CC immunity. So Mauga seems like he is going to be literally unkillable to the enemy tank. If you're playing someone like Reinhardt and then you walk out and then you see Mauga, it might be just one of those things where it's like, right, either I swap Mauga or I uninstall. Maybe like, I mean, it definitely could be the case that there are some tank counters to Mauga that we haven't figured out yet. Of course, early days. I don't know if Zarya is going to be particularly good against him, maybe. But either way, it definitely seems like Mauga's going to be mostly good at making the enemy tank miserable, which is just, once again, perpetuating the new kind of way things work of just every single character exists to bully the tank, rather than to really play the game. I mean, come on, we just had Bastion Mei meta with Orisa as the meta tank. Do we really need this now? But here's the downside. Of course, the low mobility is the downside, but what does the low mobility mean? It means, like high resource tanks that we've had already in the past, Mauga is extremely reliant on his supports to succeed, which means if you just get a game on Mauga where your supports are asleep at the wheel, you practically can't even play the game. Again, so far I've only played a small handful of games on Mauga because honestly I was not prepared for him to be coming out so soon. Again, wasn't expecting that. But the few games I have played, let's just say that the ones where I had subpar supports were games where I practically feel like I didn't get to interact with the game at all the entire time. The entire time it was either I hide behind a wall and not get shot, but literally do nothing because my character doesn't do anything hiding behind a wall, or I peek for longer than even 2 seconds and get melted from full health unless I burn all my cooldowns, but even with my cooldowns, I need to be dealing damage while using my damage resistance ability to be getting healed as well. And that means if I can't be dealing damage to the enemies while I'm being murdered by them, then I won't even survive that. And a lot of the times, I was being attacked by enemies who were already at such a distance, I couldn't deal much damage to them. It's just that they were playing characters like Zen, or Ashe, or Soldier, who could sit far enough away that I couldn't do much damage to them, but still be at a distance where they can do practically maximum damage. So yeah, my very first game with Mauga, even though the rest of them have been very fun, was actually quite miserable, because it was a game on Colosseo where essentially, as I say, my supports were asleep at the wheel, and the enemy supports had literally double their healing, both of them, and they were going Ana Zen, which was miserable. I was constantly getting hit with sleep darts and antis while being discorded and being flung orbs constantly into my face. Meanwhile, my Kiriko is going off dueling people in the backline and not getting any kills for it. And my Life Weaver somehow has literally half the healing of the enemy Zen on the highest healing output character in the game against the lowest healing output character on the game. Yeah, that game did not go too well. It literally just felt like I could not make a play at all, full stop. Because it's either don't peek, but then I can't contribute anything, or peek, but if I peek for longer than even 1 second, I will die from full health, and I will quote-unquote feed. Now, as I said, most of my games I think I got fine supports, and the ones where I did get fine supports, this character was a whole lot more fun to play. But the fact that, genuinely, I don't think I've seen a character that feels so unplayable when you don't have, like, good supports, is a little concerning. I mean, already Reinhardt is probably the highest resource character in the game. You know, Reinhardt is the main tank I think of as someone who, if you just have bad supports, then GG. But like, oh my god, I think Mauga might be worse. I think Mauga actually might have an even worse time if they just have supports that don't pay attention. So yeah, you can see why I think this character's a little concerning. It seems like they benefit a lot from having a lot of healing when we're already in a heal power creep meta, and it feels like he's also mostly just good for absolutely bullying the enemy tank when that's already been the name of the game for the past month and everyone has hated it. Because again, the whole gimmick of Mauga is he's basically an unstoppable force, but if you can just get away from him because you're faster than him, or if you can just stand somewhere where he can't reach you, then he can't do anything. And man, doesn't that just mean that this tank is going to murder the other tank, but never get any kills on DPS or supports because the DPS and supports either have too much mobility or are too far away? Now, obviously, part of the reason why they even let us play this guy earlier is probably because they are going to be paying attention to the statistics. And considering that this is not when a character would usually release, it would usually be a few weeks in the future, of course that means that likely they are paying close attention and they are going to be making balance changes based off of the information they get. And so I expect that Mauga is going to get, at the very least, a nerf to his damage output. if not also a nerf to his survivability. I'm hoping that also coincides with a bit of a buff to his mobility, but considering it doesn't seem like he's supposed to be a very mobile character, I'm not holding my breath. As I say, the damage output of Mauga right now is absolutely insane, to the point at which he can out-DPS a Transcendence, no joke, just by holding down both his primary fire and secondary fire on the same time. I think this is the first time in Overwatch history we've had a character that actually has so much damage they are capable of out-DPSing Transcendence. So yeah, I could see that coming down, but even if they do make that change, I do think that would be a positive change, but it also would still be a bit concerning. Because it's kind of like, well, if Mauga doesn't have that stupidly high damage in a meta where healing is way too high and it's still kind of not really been addressed, then, well, isn't he just going to be terrible then when he releases? And considering I don't see them giving him many buffs to his mobility, I worry they might instead think, okay, let's just keep buffing his survivability, and then he might just become Orisa 2.0, where he's just a literal unkillable wall kind of tank. They simply exist to be unkillable and stand there. They're technically dealing damage, but they're never going to get any kills. But they're not going to die either. That's kind of where I see Mauga being in the future. Again, I really don't want to be too pessimistic, and I hope I'm wrong. But I have already seen a little bit of a sentiment that even though he's just come out, people found him very, very fun for their first couple games, but I'm already seeing a couple of people who already seem a little bit burnt out on the character, and I think a lot of that is because, again, I feel like his gameplay loop is falling into a little bit of an Orisa 2.0. Now, I'm not sure which order these videos will be uploaded in. I was going to upload a video on the mid-season patch, but then this happened, so that's probably coming at some point soon if it hasn't already come out. In that video, which is going to be very, very long, I give you fair warning, I mentioned that I was planning on making some predictions in a video I didn't end up uploading before the mid-season came out about the future of Overwatch, and basically saying I think Season 7 is going to be like the middle of this dark age. And I made some pretty specific predictions, but ones that I am relatively confident in. I said that the mid-season patch won't really address the problem, even though they will try, because they don't understand how bad the problem is, and they fundamentally don't understand from a beginning how they even got here. And I'll say this, the mid-season patch was better than I thought it would be, but still, yeah, I wouldn't say the mid-season has solved the problem. So far, pretty accurate. The next prediction in that line that I was going to make is that the Season 8 tank is going to come out, and they are going to perform awfully because we are in a bully the tank meta. And because they're going to perform awfully, they are going to get giga buffed because they can't have their new character be awful now, can they? And when they get giga buffed, they are going to become OP, but everyone is going to hate them and everyone is going to be miserable. Because you would have to giga buff a tank to hell and back at this rate for them to actually be able to be good, despite how much supports are shutting them down right now. Which will probably lead to the game reaching such an unstable state of balance that they'll finally realize something has to change, and probably not instantly fix the problem, but start taking some more serious measures. Which means that I would expect the earliest things could really get better in terms of the meta is Season 9, probably more like Season 10. Quite a grim prediction, I know, but obviously I think the future could be a lot brighter the second we do get past this support power creep problem. And so far, I'm getting a little bit more confident in that prediction. Considering I'm looking at Mauga right now and thinking, okay, if everyone starts playing this tank because they're the new character and everyone wants to play the new character, it is going to be so easy to bully him if you want to. Like, I acknowledge that once everything settles down and, like, you know, you don't really have the ability to predict whether someone's going to play Mauga or some other tank because, you know, not everyone's playing him at the moment. Like, maybe not, it wouldn't be so much of a problem, but at the time at which everyone is going to be playing Mauga, it is going to be so easy to just pick a character that bullies him. It's going to be so easy to just stand on high ground a soldier and just hold left click on him until he eventually runs out of abilities to use and dies. It's going to be so easy with the new giga buffed Zenyatta to just sit on high ground and fling orbs at him while he's discorded. It is going to be so easy to pump this guy full of sleep darts and anti-nades as Ana. And so while he might feel kind of strong right now because no one really knows what they're doing with him and no one knows how to play against him because of how brand new he is, I really think that once people figure everything out, it is going to be that this tank gets murdered. Once again, unless they giga buff him. And already we're kind of playing with a quote-unquote giga buffed version of him, it kind of feels like, considering, again, literally does more damage than Bastion on a tank, and it's not even a cooldown, it's just his primary fire. And yet, despite that, he still isn't really top-tier material, it seems. So yeah, as much as I hate to say it, it's looking like those predictions are pretty accurate so far. Either way, that's Mauga. And I'm sure that a lot of you will enjoy playing him for now anyway, even if I'm very concerned for the implications it holds for the future. With all that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.